At exactly 6:12 a.m., Ethan unlocked his phone before getting out of bed. Not to check the news, not to read his emails. He opened one app, his investment account. For almost 20 years, he had looked at that screen every Friday morning. Usually, nothing exciting happened. Sometimes the market was up, sometimes it was down. Most weeks looked exactly like the week before. But this morning was different. One number had quietly crossed a line. For the first time in his life, his investments had generated more money over the past 12 months than he had personally invested. He stared at the screen. Not because he had become a millionaire overnight. He hadn't. Not because he had discovered some incredible stock. He hadn't. The strange part was this. Nothing in his life looked different. His alarm still rang before sunrise. His coffee tasted exactly the same. He still planned to drive to work. So why did this ordinary Friday suddenly feel like the most important morning of his life? Stay with me. Because by the end of this story, you'll understand why this moment changes the way people think about work forever, and why most investors quit long before they ever experience it. Hello, I'm Kaya. People often believe wealth begins with a huge investment, or an extraordinary salary, or one perfect stock. But history tells a different story. Again and again, long-term investors have built significant wealth through something much less exciting. Small amounts, repeated consistently, for years. Our story begins 19 years earlier. Ethan was 27. He worked as a maintenance technician at a manufacturing company. His paycheck covered the bills, but not much more. One evening, while helping his grandfather clean out the garage, Ethan found an old wooden toolbox. Inside was a faded envelope. It contained handwritten notes, no stock tips, no secret investments, just one sentence written across the top of the page. Your future depends far more on your daily actions than on your expectations. His grandfather had invested almost every month for more than 30 years, never chasing trends, never trying to become rich quickly, just buying diversified investments over and over again. At first, Ethan wasn't impressed. It sounded boring, like the opposite of everything people talked about online. But curiosity got the better of him. That weekend, he opened his first investment account. Every Friday, $350 automatically left his bank account. Rain or sunshine, bull market or crash, good mood or bad mood. The first year felt almost disappointing. The account barely grew. Some months, the market even erased weeks of progress. More than once, Ethan wondered if he should stop. Maybe the people making thousands with the latest hot stock had figured out something he hadn't. Then something happened. A major market correction sent prices sharply lower. At work, everyone talked about selling. News headlines predicted more losses. Friends told him investing was too dangerous. Even Ethan started questioning himself. Maybe they were right. Then he remembered his grandfather's note. Your future is built by what you repeat. Instead of stopping, he bought more. It felt completely wrong. Yet decades of market history reveal something surprising. Some of the strongest market recoveries have followed periods of the greatest fear. Investors who continued buying during downturns often purchased shares at lower prices, giving future growth even more room to compound. Ethan didn't know exactly when the market would recover. Nobody did. But he understood something else. Waiting until everything felt safe usually meant paying a much higher price. Slowly, the market recovered. Then it reached new highs. Years passed. His account crossed $50,000, then $120,000. The numbers became larger. But something else remained exactly the same. Every Friday, another $350 disappeared from his checking account. No celebration, no dramatic breakthrough, just another ordinary transfer. If you had looked at Ethan's life back then, you never would have guessed what was quietly happening beneath the surface. But another milestone was approaching, one that almost every long-term investor remembers, because it is the first moment you realize your money has finally begun working harder than you are. And once that happens, everything changes. For years, Ethan believed investing was about reaching a certain number, $100,000, $500,000, maybe even $1 million. He thought freedom had a price tag, but he was about to discover that it had something else entirely, a turning point, one that almost nobody talks about. Here's a surprising fact. Studies on long-term investing show that the majority of a portfolio's growth often occurs during the later years. Compounding starts slowly, But once your investments become large enough, they begin generating more growth than your own contributions. That's why patience isn't just important, it's essential. And it's also why so many investors quit too early. They leave just before compounding begins doing its heaviest lifting. Ethan nearly became one of them. There were years when the market barely moved. Years when it fell sharply. Years when friends told him he was wasting his money. Some chased the latest technology stocks. Others bought cryptocurrencies after seeing spectacular returns online. For a brief moment, Ethan questioned everything. Was he falling behind? Had he chosen the boring path while everyone else was getting rich? Then he looked at history instead of headlines. For more than a century, diversified stock markets have repeatedly recovered from recessions, crashes, wars, and financial crises. Every major downturn eventually became just another chapter in a much longer story. That realization kept him invested. Every Friday, without exception. Then came the morning we started with. The screen looked almost identical to every other Friday, except for one number. Over the previous 12 months, his portfolio had earned more than he had personally invested. For years, Ethan had been pushing the engine. Now the engine was pushing itself. He didn't shout. He didn't celebrate. He simply sat there in silence. Because he knew something had changed forever. His money was no longer depending primarily on him. He had reached the point where time had become his greatest financial partner. A few days later, Ethan visited his grandfather. The old workshop behind the house looked exactly as it always had. The same wooden bench, the same worn tools, the same smell of fresh-cut timber. His grandfather was repairing an old chair. Ethan couldn't understand why. "You don't need to do this anymore," he said. "You've had enough money for years." His grandfather smiled without looking up. "I know. So, why keep working?" This time the old man stopped. He looked at Ethan for a moment before answering. "When I was young, I worked because I needed money. Today I work because I love building things. Money gave me that choice." Those 4 words stayed with Ethan long after he drove home. Money gave me that choice. For years, he had believed financial freedom meant escaping work. Now he understood something much deeper. It meant escaping obligation. A month later, one of the younger technicians at work asked Ethan why he always seemed so calm whenever the stock market dropped. Ethan smiled. "Because falling markets don't change my plan. They're simply part of it." The young man nodded politely. But Ethan recognized the same uncertainty he had once felt himself. Some lessons can't be explained. They have to be experienced. Think back to the beginning of this story. Most people believe the greatest day in investing is the day you become a millionaire. It isn't. The greatest day is the one when you realize your future no longer depends entirely on the next paycheck, because that's the moment money stops being your goal and quietly becomes your servant. So before you ask how much you need to retire, ask yourself a better question. If money were no longer the reason you got out of bed tomorrow, what would you choose to do instead? Because that's what financial freedom has always been about. Not doing nothing, but finally having the freedom to decide everything.